My son Stephen's he's 22 now. He's got severe autism and severe learning difficulties. He sort of functions at sort of 5 to 6 year old level, and he lives on his own with me. We live in a flat in Uxbridge. I suppose what happened, our nightmare began. It was the day before New Year's Eve in 2009. Stephen always finds Christmas a bit difficult to manage because his whole life's sort of based on routines, and so we'd had a difficult time the week before Christmas. Stephen's okay Christmas Day, Boxing Day, he can cope with that, but then his sort of anxiety sort of cranks up again after Christmas, until all the New Year routines kick in again. And unfortunately that year I had flu. I'd been struggling for a couple of days trying to sort of manage Stephen on my own. And at that point, Stephen had been going to a respite house in Hillingdon. He'd been going there for one night a fortnight for the previous 2 years. So I phoned the manager one Wednesday afternoon and said, "Look, I've got the flu. Do you have a bed for Stephen for a couple of days?" So the plan was, when Stephen left home that day, that he was going to his normal respite place with his normal support workers and stay until the Saturday. And he would be coming home on the Saturday. Next thing, the following day, New Year's Eve, the social worker phoned me up first thing in the morning, said she wanted to come and see me, and she reported that the staff at the unit had had a difficult night with Stephen, and she was proposing that they move Stephen to what's called a positive behaviour unit, not far from us. And her proposal was also that he stay there for a couple of weeks. It was put to me, give you a chance to recharge your batteries, Mark. So I regret it bitterly now, but I think that's the mistake I made. I went along with that. But even then, the plan was that Stephen would come home within 2 weeks. Problem was, because the move was unexpected for him, and because he didn't really want to be there, and for people with autism where routine is so important, his behaviour became very difficult very, very quickly. Where we were getting sort of a handful of incidents at home, they were kind of beginning to log 20 odd incidents a week. So very, very quickly, within the space of a couple of weeks, the whole thing escalated to Hillingdon believing that Stephen's behaviour was too challenging for him to be at home, and needed to stay there indefinitely. And that was the kind of block we got stuck into for the next 2 or 3 months. Their position being Stephen needs to be here so we can assess him. My position being that where he should be at home, his behaviour will change dramatically if he's allowed to come home. My feelings, I was desperate really. I couldn't believe how they'd always encouraged me to seek respite if I was unwell or if there was a problem at home. And the kind of first time that I'd asked for anything above the normal arrangement, I suddenly found myself in a situation where I wasn't getting him back. It just felt terrifying. Stephen, as I say, his behaviour was pretty, awful at the time. But for me, that's just a sign of how anxious and how frightened he is. He doesn't kind of tend to lash out for no reason. For him, his challenging behaviour is always a sign to me that he's really, really anxious about something. Well, Stephen was at this positive behaviour unit for about 3 months, and then one thing that we discovered when we went to court, which neither Stephen nor I were told about at the time, was that the council were planning to move him away a lot sooner than they actually told us. There were minutes of a professionals meeting from the beginning of April, where there were 4 action points in the minutes of the meeting. One was that Stephen would not be allowed to come home permanently. 2, they would look for alternative places for him to live. 3, Mr. Nearing must not be told of these arrangements. And fourthly, to consider a deprivation of liberty authorisation. So that was all in the air anyway. But I think what escalated it was one Sunday afternoon, middle of April 2010, Stephen escaped from the positive behaviour unit. He got outside, and I don't think anyone will ever know exactly what happened that day because there was no staff around. It was just Stephen and this man who he bumped into in the road. And the following day I was phoned by the manager of the Positive Behaviour Unit to say they were authorising the first 7-day urgent deprivation of liberty order. I'd never heard of them at the time. So within the first week they served the first order, which was I think for 2 months. I read all the paperwork, and Stephen had a best interest assessment as part of the authorisation. Yeah, I knew Stephen should have had an advocate at the time, but I think there must have been a breakdown in communication between Hillingdon and whoever they approached to be the advocate, because I was told Stephen wasn't entitled to one. And over the course of the year, 4 more doles were served. Each time I met the best interest assessor, I asked her about getting an advocate, but we never actually got one until November. We were just about to be served the 4th dole, and I'd made a complaint by this point about the lack of advocacy. And then all of a sudden one day, I think Hillingdon must have contacted Power, because all of a sudden one day I got a phone call from an advocate called Scylla. She arranged to come and see me. So we met in my flat for a couple of hours, and I gave her all the background to Stephen's case. She then went and met the people at the Positive Behaviour Unit. She went and met Steve and met the social worker. And around about that time, we were due to meet the 4th best interest assessor. Stephen's dole was coming up for renewal. So she agreed to come along to the meeting with the best interest assessor with me. And Scylla was fairly confident that we could stop the 4th dole being served. I kind of knew Hillingdon's position by this point, that would be easier said than done. So we met the best interest assessor. As expected, they served the 4th order. Scylla then came with me to a meeting to meet the managers from the social care team who were involved in the decision. But that didn't really get us anywhere as well. So it was after that meeting with the managers that Scylla and I met again, and she said, really, court is the only answer open to us now. And from then it moved really, really quickly. So I think it was about 3 weeks after I met Scylla that we actually got a solicitor. And then 3 weeks after getting the solicitor, Stephen was home. He was home almost a year to the day that he went away. So we went back to court in February, and the judge decided it should be a permanent order. It was in Stephen's best interest to be at home. And the official solicitor who'd been acting on Stephen's behalf was also pushing for a judicial inquiry over Hillingdon's actions for the whole year that Stephen had been away. So we then had to go back to court again in May, and that was a week-long inquiry. And ultimately the judge decided that all 4 deprivation of liberty orders that had been served throughout the year were unlawful. And that it had never been in Stephen's best interest to be kept away from his home. So that was an enormous relief when the judge delivered his judgment. Because although I'd never kind of sort of doubted my opinion, my belief in what was best for Stephen, I've been quite kind of lonely, trying to battle against these sort of committees of people. And to have Scylla and then the court experts come on board and to say, yeah, well, this is what is in Stephen's best interest, did kind of feel vindicated, I suppose.